G'day, I'm Tim Thompson. Well, the day has finally come. We have beautiful weather and we are picking the grapes. It's been a season fraught with anxiety this year. We had over 100 mil of rain about 5 days ago, and we've had to wait for the effects of that rain to come out of the grapes. We couldn't pick earlier, as you saw in the last video. The acid levels just weren't right, sugar levels just weren't right. We've waited, we've been really strong and brave, and now we have some fantastic fruit to pick and make wine with. So let's go through the process of picking this fruit, crushing and destemming it, inoculating it with yeast, fertilizing it with some DAP, and starting the process of fermentation. Don't forget, if you do like this content and you want to see more of it, please hit the subscribe button down there, give it a thumbs up. You've got no idea how much it helps. Let's start picking. Unfortunately, this season hasn't all been plain sailing. The fruit here looks beautiful, but as we come down a bit, you'll see that quite a bit's been eaten. Now you might think birds, but we're on the inside of the net. There's a bit of a clue down here. Hello, Mr. Fox. That hole there is not from a bird. A fox has been in here and in one day he's cleaned up 2 rows. Now on a commercial vineyard, that's not so much of a problem. But when 2 rows is a quarter of your crop, that's a really big problem. And how do I know it's a fox? Apart from the size of that hole down there that wasn't there 2 days ago, we happen to have security footage. So doing things on small scale has its own sets of drawbacks. Yes, you might not have the large scale inputs and expense, but if small things go wrong, you've got to be prepared for major impacts on your production. So I'm going to have to sort out what I do about some extra fruit this year because of one mangy damn fox. With a small vineyard, sometimes taking the nets off by hand right before you pick is sometimes more practical than using machinery. Another little problem that we've had this year, I don't know if you can see it or not, but I'll come in as close as I can. We've had a bit of hen and chicken. During flowering, we had about a week of rain right on the top of flowering, and that meant that the caps stuck on the flowers and they didn't immediately flower, and so they didn't fertilize. The pollen didn't actually go down into the anther and fertilize the seed. So we end up with these little, we call them chickens to the hens. So these little underdeveloped berries. And as the season goes on, I don't know if you can see it or not, but they start to die off. They start to go into what we call necrosis. And as they start to die off, you can see it in here, there's a very real risk that you're going to get powdery mildew develop on them, and that'll spread to the rest of the bunch. Now there is a tiny bit of powdery mildew on a couple of the bunches, but we had a very heavy spray program this year to take into account for that. And I'm pleased to say we've managed to keep most of the fruit on the vine. Here's another example just above of hen and chicken. There were probably a handful of vines that it was really badly affected on. This is one of those vines, and you can see that quite a few berries did not get pollinated. There's no seed in them, so the fruit didn't develop. And as the season goes on, you can see they're starting to die off and starting to go into necrosis. That is a real disease harbour, and when you have that condition in your vineyard, you've got to adjust your spray schedule accordingly. Thankfully, with the good spray schedule, the fruit's still fine. It'll all go into the pot and all go towards making some fine wine. So this is the best day of the year as far as I'm concerned. You get to pick the fruit and see the potential of 12 months worth of work its way through ferment, into the barrel, and then eventually 12 months later into the bottle. What an amazing thing. Always beautiful weather in autumn. Love to be picking grapes. When I hear cicadas creaking, all I can think of is high quality wine. And I just love the romance of this particular time of the year. Obviously, having a farm and a vineyard in a school, which is where this one's at, adds an extra layer of complexity. At the moment, we can't crush or press the fruit because a homeless guy living under the science building thought that zombies were attacking him because he was having a bad trip and lit a fire to protect himself, taking out the power. So now our crusher destemmer doesn't work. all on the one day. I tell you what, when you work in schools, life's never dull or boring. So with the power out, this has created a few problems. We've managed to go and get ourselves a generator, so we're back up and running. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to get our nice fruit from the top here, we're going to crush it, take the stems off and put it into the vat here to start its ferment. And we're back up and running. This is the critical moment. This is where we see whether we've got it running or not. Yes! So the fruit gets pulled through the hopper by this auger and goes down into a set of blades that resemble Mum's old washing machine. That squeezes the berries. Once the berries are squeezed, this part of the machine here spins off the stalks and they come tumbling out. You've got to be careful that the stalks don't bridge in the end of the machine here, because if they do, they'll start to drop into your ferment. So one of the things when you're using a small crusher destemmer is every couple of loads, make sure you scrape out the stalks. So that's it, job's done for the year. Unfortunately, thanks to Mr. Fox and birds, we only got about 50% of the fruit that we normally get, which is a real issue for us because we normally only get enough to fill a barrel. So I'm going to have to go hunting around somewhere to get some extra fruit. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. It's just a relief when you get to the end of the year when all the fruit's in the pot. You know that all you have to do is keep the hygiene standards up and plunge it twice a day every day, check your temps and bomays, and everything else is going to take care of itself. The main strain is growing the fruit and getting it off the vines. There's a lot of stress in that, as I've probably shared with you a bit on this video series. Lots of decisions to make, lots of difficult decisions to make, but the optimum end is to have good quality grapes in that pot, because now as a winemaker, regardless of the volume of grapes I have the opportunity to do the right thing by those grapes, take them through ferment in the right way, preserve the flavours that were developed in the vineyard, and then mature them into a full-bodied wine in 12 months' time. And I'm going to take you on the journey of doing that. So obviously now that we've done, part and parcel of the whole process is cleaning up. If you get your hygiene right now, you'll save bacterial and yeast spoilage of your wine, and you'll also have equipment that doesn't break down next time you pull it out and have a go. So we're going to spend about the next hour and a half or so cleaning everything, floors, machinery, buckets, snips, anything that touched grapes today gets a clean. Don't clean the engine and don't clean the bearings. If you clean the engine, it could be shocking. Having the machine running while you're cleaning it helps rotate all the gears and gets all of the muck out of all of the hidden cavities. So we have to be very careful with OH&S, and there's one rule: don't be an idiot. Okay, so we've got all our fruit in the pot, and it's been a pretty horrible year. So as you can see, we're down quite a bit on our crop, but we'll still get a couple of 100 litres of wine out of this, so it's not wasted effort. First thing we need to do, because Australia is low in phosphate in our soils, we need to add some phosphate, some fertiliser to this. So I'm going to add some diammonium phosphate to the ferment. I'm just putting in about 100 grams there of DAP. Now what that's going to do is it's going to provide the energy, well, the basic building blocks to make energy for the yeast cells. So they're not going to have to reduce sulfur in the ferment and start to make rotten egg gas, because that's not a smell that you associate with good quality wine. So tip number one, put some DAP into your wine. Next, we've got some water. Now I've heated this water to about 38 degrees. I'm going to put a little bit of juice in there, just to put a little bit of sugar in there, and then we're going to get our winemaking yeast. Doesn't really matter brands for home winemakers, but just know that different yeasts impart different flavours and ferment characteristics to your brew. So have a good chat to your winemaker who's advising you, or to your local brew shop before you select a yeast. I'm going with a yeast that gives a reasonably cool ferment, because I want this to take a few days. Now we're going to leave that yeast to sit in the top of this 38 degree water for a few minutes until it starts to bubble. Then we're just going to loosely apply it to the top of the grapes, put the lid on the grapes for the night, come back tomorrow morning, and we should see a ferment underway. As the yeast sits there, you can see it's starting to bubble up off the bottom and produce carbon dioxide gas. So we're giving the yeast a nice, gentle, warm start before we throw it in the harsh reality of the cool juice. The juice is probably only at about 18 or 19 degrees Celsius. So we want to give it just a little bit of a boost to get it up on its way. And you can see she's starting to foam at the top already. We'll just let that get a bit more of a head. So now's the moment of truth. We see if our sampling was accurate. I'm expecting around about 24 bricks. We'll use our refractometer for the last time this year. Have a look through the lens. Oh, 23.9. Not bad, considering the hen and chicken we had. From now on, I'm going to measure the sugar and the temperature twice a day, every day. If the ferment starts to get too hot, I'll apply chilling to it. You can just put bagged ice around the outside of the vessel if you don't have any access to stuff. I'm lucky in this room I've got an air conditioner that's enough to bring this small batch down in temperature. If you've got really large batches, it pays to buy a little refrigeration unit and actually put some hoses through it that contain chilled water. We want to try and keep the ferment down to around about 30 degrees or a bit cooler. If it spikes up over 34, 35 degrees, you start to get really sort of extracted flavours, you start to get really harsh tannins, and it just starts to go all a bit jammy. You want to try and preserve your soft fruit flavours by keeping the temperature down during ferment. So it's critical to manage your ferment. I want to lose about 1 Beaumet a day, and I want to keep the temperature down below 30 degrees. If I'm not achieving that, I know that my wine won't be as of a higher quality as it could be. And quite frankly, from the taste of this juice at the moment, I think it's going to be pretty good. So our yeast is foamed up now, it's working nicely, so all I have to do now is spread that yeast out over the top of the juice, and overnight that'll start to work its magic and produce me some flavoursome, beautiful alcohol. Let's put the top on it and put it to bed. It's important to keep a top on your ferment. It'll do two things. It'll stop vinegar flies from finding your brew and turning it into, well, vinegar. I suppose that's why they're called vinegar flies. And it'll also stop oxygen getting in there and spoiling your wine. You want to try and keep your wine in an oxygen-free environment. If you like this video, please do hit the little subscribe button down there. Give it a like. You've got no idea how much that helps the channel.